Happy Monday! I'm Natalia Bonner and I am so excited to share this quilt with you today. It's actually just a little sneak peek, kind of a snippet of this quilt, a little bit of the machine quilting that I've done here. You can find a full video where I walk you really step by step through my whole entire machine quilting process over on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Natalia Bonner. But today I'm going to be sharing a couple of the star quilt blocks and showing you how I quilted them. So this cool quilt that I'm quilting today is called Little Miss Sawtooth. This pattern is by Southern Charm Quilts, and this quilt is actually mine. Maybe that's why I'm so excited about it. Most of the quilts that I have shared with you throughout the years, besides my stitch alongs and my classes, are quilts that I am working on for my clients. So I do still machine quilt for clients, but because of that, most of the quilts that I've made over the years end up having edge-to-edge quilting or really simple quilting. I just really never spend as much time on my own quilts. Don't we all do this as we do the ones for other people? So I am so excited that I took the time to really custom machine quilt this quilt, and it's mine. It's something that I can have as a treasure that I did all by myself. I'm ecstatic about this quilt. So my local quilt guild, Red Rock Modern Quilt Guild, in that guild we pieced together throughout the year this Little Miss Sawtooth star quilt. I had a lot of fun making mine really as scrappy as I could. I'm not a huge scrappy person, so this was a little bit of a challenge for me, but I love it. I love the results. I love how I was able to machine quilt it, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. So the thread that I'm using on this quilt, on the top I'm using So Fine thread. I chose to use just one color across the whole entire quilt, color number 402. Even on the darker areas, there's some blues and greens and different things like that. I stuck with one color. I felt like there's so much going on this quilt already, and with my heavy custom quilting, I think it's better off just to keep the thread really simple. Then on the bobbin, the thread that I'm using is bottom line color number 624. This quilt ended up with some really awesome dimension and texture. The reason that I was able to create such great texture but still keep my quilt kind of soft, I am using one layer of the Quilter's Dream wool batting on this quilt, and that batting really keeps a soft but cool amount of texture to it. So that's what I'll be using here. You can pick up all of those products plus my machine quilting rulers and lots of other yummy things over on our website, peaceandquilt.com. But in the meantime, let's get stitching. On this fun quilt, I'm going to start out this portion is stitching using my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler. I'm keeping this quilt pretty simple, so here I'm going to start out with some point-to-point curves. Now, when I say I'm keeping this quilt simple, that's maybe wrong. I am doing a lot of crazy quilting here, but on these stars, I'm going to keep the quilting on these outside star points a little bit more simple because I am doing such detailed custom quilting throughout the rest of the quilt. Now, anytime that you do machine quilting with rulers, there are a few things that you do need to keep in mind. So I do have an extended base plate here on my machine. That's why I have a nice flat working surface. It almost kind of plays a trick on your eye. It looks like my quilt's pulled really tight here on my machine, but it's actually just because I have that extended base plate on under there. Now, notice I am using the foot that comes on the Gamble machine. You can use as a ruler foot, but I'm also using the actual Gamble ruler foot here on my machine. So anytime you do machine quilting with rulers, you need to make sure that you're using a ruler foot, you have your extended base plate on, and another thing to always think about is you want to hold your ruler 1/4 of an inch away from where you want your stitching. So there's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you master it, you can create some amazing results. Now, I also love the look of Stitch in the Ditch. So with my quilting, you'll definitely see a lot of Stitch in the Ditch. On this quilt block, after I've done a bit of stitch in the ditch work and quilting on those outside stars, then working to the center, I'm going to stitch some loops in those triangles. Because the print's a little bit busier, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I'm going to do something pretty simple that plays nicely coming out from the center there. Now, once I've stitched those loops, if you've been following along in my stitch along, you're probably going to recognize some of these designs. If you aren't following along in my stitch along, you can always go back and check out those block designs. I teach you step by step how to machine quilt 365 different quilt block designs. And this fun one that I'm stitching out right here on my fussy cut sewing machine is one of those block designs. And moving on, let's stitch out another block. So again, I'm using my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler. On this quilt, I did work back and forth between my mini 4-in-1 and my regular 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler. There's some places where it's easier to use the mini, and there's definitely places where the regular 4-in-1 comes in as a favorable ruler. So I like to use both, and it's kind of how I work with all my quilting. I use multiple rulers, work back and forth between them all. So I'm starting out this block by stitching in the ditch all the way around the outside. Once I've completed that stitch in the ditch work around the outside, now keeping it simple again on those star points, I'm going to use the largest curve on the mini 4-in-1 and stitch some point-to-point curves, remembering to hold my ruler 1/4 of an inch away from where I want my thread to intersect. From there, then I'll move on to the center, where I'll start out by stitching in the ditch all the way around that center block. Once I've completed that stitch in the ditch work, then I'm going to go right into a swirl background filler. So I do teach you step by step how to quilt this background filler in my online class, Beginner's Guide to Free Motion Quilting, and also my book. But a couple of points to remember as you stitch that out. Always leave yourself an out. Then, as I'm stitching, I'm going to stitch to the point where I can start stitching in the ditch around that inside center star. So I use my swirls kind of as a traveling stitch to get from one point to another. I try to never clip my threads unless I absolutely have to. As I'm stitching in the ditch around that center star, I'm also going to work my way to the center block on that center star and add a fun point-to-point curve design. Now, bonus points for anybody who can tell me the name of this block design from my stitch along. Once I've completed that center block, then from there, I'll travel back out, complete the stitch in the ditch work around the outside of the star, and then from there, I'll work my way back into that swirl background filler. And continuing on, let's stitch one more of these adorable quilt block designs. Now, if you do want to see more of how I quilt out the background, that secondary design, make sure you do check out my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Natalia Bonner. So on this star, like I've done on the other stars, I'm going to start out by stitching in the ditch around the outside and then also stitching that point-to-point simplistic curve. Once I've stitched all those point-to-point curves, then I'm going to travel to the center where I'll stitch in the ditch around that center block. Now, because this center block is a 4-patch, I'll start out by stitching all the way around the outside. Then from there, I'm actually going to continue using the largest curve on the mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler and stitching point-to-point curves through the center of that block design. So I'll stitch all the way across, then back to the center. From there, then I'll work out into the green block. Once I've stitched in the green block, then I'll move to the gold block, stitching the point-to-point curves, back to the center point, and then back to the outside of the block where I began stitching. From there, I do love heavy quilting, so I am going to continue on and stitch in the ditch through the center, those remaining lines. And here are a few images of this gorgeous quilt. I can say it's gorgeous because it's mine, right? After all the machine quilting is complete. I just love how this one turned out, and I'm so happy that I really get to keep this one. So here you can see that secondary design really come to life. I love it. And then all over, you can see the whole entire quilt. Those secondary designs are awesome. I love how they just play off of the actual stars. So use the lines that are there and you can really create some amazing quilting.